So my name is Noe Monarres, and I'm the health educator for Knoxville for Planned Parenthood of Tennessee and North Mississippi. So I studied at UT. I double majored in child and family studies with the community outreach concentration and bachelor's in sociology with a concentration in critical race and ethnic studies. So while I was doing my double bachelor's, I was also actively working at Centro Hispano in their youth and family engagement program as one of the after-school site coordinators. I've been a nonprofit for a hot minute. And while I was there, I was just in a meeting with our AmeriCorps Vista member at the time who was coordinating our post-secondary education access program. And she got an email from my predecessor at Planned Parenthood Somali, and it was like preliminary, like, hey, we're about to put this job posting out. If there's anybody you know that'd be interested. This was like maybe 2.5 months before I graduated, and I was like, do not send that email to anybody else. I swear to God, if anybody else gets this before I do, I'm gonna cry, because it's been my dream job since I was like 13 or 12. So I immediately applied, and I ended up getting it, so. So this is one of those things that like people try to use as a gotcha moment. So we do acknowledge that Margaret Sanger, yeah, I have to take the glasses off. Like we do acknowledge that Margaret Sanger was the founder of Planned Parenthood, right? Like we do know that the origin of the organization and like the work that we do is stemming initially from eugenics, right? Like, and racism, like that's all it was. However, we can also acknowledge that like it's been so long since, not that we can hide from it, but rather knowing that that's where this came from, we have to be very intentional about which communities we're serving, how we're serving them, and the information we're presenting. So in the past, yes, it may have initially come from eugenics and racism and just like, you know, eradicating anybody that wasn't white, but it's transformed into something much more sustainable and much more supportive and assisting, specifically for the queer community, specifically for underprivileged, like marginalized, low-income folks. Yes, like that is a horrible history that we have, but that is also something that kind of pushes the newer, active, today's generation and people and staffers to actively do the opposite, if that makes sense. So, yeah. And it's all about, you know, reproductive justice nowadays. You know, everybody has a right to have a family when they want to have a family, if they want to have a family, and to have it in a safe and healthy environment. That's really the core of it, right? Typically, the way I explain it to people, I make a distinction between the clinical side and the external affairs side. So typically most people just assume or only know about the clinical stuff, so that's usually where you hear about like people can come get birth control options, like the implant IUD, the pill, etc. Typically it's where people think of when they have to go get an STI test, right, and treatment, so like, or a UTI and treatment, so like any kind of sexual reproductive health clinical service. Of course, we also used to offer abortion services until, you know, state law changed that. And then one of our biggest services that we've been offering for the last like few years actually has been gender-affirming hormone care, which obviously is going to impact directly the trans community. That's one of the biggest, like, most utilized programs, at least in our region, specifically in East Tennessee, which is kind of wild to consider, but it's awesome. And then like we also of course offer pregnancy testing, and we've also now been offering like well person visits and just like general physical exams in clinic. And then we have the external affairs side, so that's usually where you consider like education, so that I come in as a sex educator. You also have advocacy, and also like community outreach engagement in a way. So advocacy, they're technically under the TAP, so Tennessee Advocates for Planned Parenthood, and they're more so like the legal political branch of the organization, if that makes sense, because there has to be a distinction between C3 and C4, which is a whole legal thing. So they're the ones that would be doing canvassing, phone banking, you know, like they're the ones that will organize marches or speaking engagements for like certain candidates that we support, that do support abortion and reproductive rights, that type of thing. And then through the education and community engagement side, which is where I am, it's really, you know, I have my own 2 programs. We have one in each of the 3 big cities. It's a peer education program for adolescent teenagers. Typically after school, we're not allowed in school, so it's like volunteer application based, but the way it's structured typically is like first semester they learn the basic sex ed, you know, like puberty, anatomy, what are the different birth control options, what are the different STIs, you know, the typical stuff that you don't actually learn in school, the foundational sex ed information. And then the second semester is typically more like diving deeper into those topics. Like sometimes I've had psychologists come in and talk about like how eating disorders impact adolescent self-esteem and like their development, you know, through the rest of their adolescence. We had somebody else come in and talk about ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, and how that specifically impacts people's sexuality in adolescence and how they start to navigate their sexual experiences when they have previous trauma, stuff like that. And then also trying to like a life skills type of deal, like, you know, like show them like this is what a grant is, like this is what nonprofits, this is how structures work, just so they kind of have a better understanding as they go into transition into college or like post high school, and like are more prepared to and more equipped to tackle these issues and feel comfortable and confident knowing that they have the capacity and skill set to do it. I guess so, starting off with the clinical stuff, you know, you can't really name any other like healthcare organization or like health clinic in this area, at least that I know of, you know, that like, I mean, we did have KCRH, not any longer, unfortunately. We do have Choice Health Network, but like there's not that many that if you were to say, I need something specific to my sexual reproductive health and it's a medical service or clinical service, yes, there's a great likelihood that, you know, your PCP might be able to do it, your general doctor. But most people don't have PCPs. Like, we know that a lot of people don't have health insurance. A lot of people are living under the poverty line or just low income. So even if they did have a PCP, they may not even be able to afford that or offer it. So that's where Planned Parenthood steps in. Like clinically, like we are the #1 hub for sexual reproductive health, specifically for low income folks. And as we know, like historically and sociologically, we know that's typically non-white communities, immigrant communities, individuals within the disability community, and typically queer individuals. So it's necessary and important because where else are they going to get it? And that's just kind of crucial to like living and like overall health. And then with sex education and like advocacy, it's just really important to ensure like advocacy-wise that we engage with the community, right? Like medicine, healthcare does not exist in a silo outside of society and our needs. So why should we legislate as if it did? So that's where the advocacy component comes in. And then with sex education, I like to say sexuality education is more than what goes in where. That's what typically people tend to think about. It's really learning this capacity to self-reflect, understand your own values, and then use that knowledge to then make healthier choices for yourself as you navigate all your social relationships. Like everybody's going to interact with another person at some point in their life, whether it's a romantic partner, a one-night fling, or literally just a person you see like as your server. We all interact with people. Like that's the point of humanity. And so like sex education is really learning yourself and learning how you want to navigate with your body with other people. And that's crucial because nobody lives alone, nowhere in society, so. So like I mentioned earlier about gender-affirming hormone care, like that's typically one of our biggest programs in the area. So obviously most trans folks that are on hormone therapy are there, I would name them as the ones that are biggest benefactors. And then of course anyone, I think really what we've seen is prior to abortion falling, we saw that a lot of abortion-seeking patients were either obviously young college students or like teenagers. You know, they don't really want to get pregnant at that age. And it's also been a lot of families, like mothers with with other children, with pre-existing kids, like parents with other kids that don't want to keep expanding the family, like, or resources are already spread thin, they just don't have the capacity to. So that's, you know, one of the biggest benefactors of the services. And then it's truly hard to pinpoint like anyone else specifically because it's like who wouldn't. Like everybody needs to be getting STI tested, everybody should be checking for UTIs, everybody should be getting XYZ when it comes to well exams and pap smears if you need it, and you know, all the work. So obviously starting with abortion and clinical stuff, a lot has changed in the last like even 10 years within like the clinical stuff. Like there's been changes that have impacted Title X funding, family access planning. There have been changes that obviously affected abortion and who can access that and where you can access that and how you can access that. So clearly there's medical clinical stuff. What hasn't changed? Like something's going to change every other week type of deal. Overall, like I would say we've expanded a lot more into like education and advocacy here. I think that's still what people typically are shook about. Like, again, everybody hears Planned Parenthood, they think abortion, they think STI testing, you know, sex. Education is just as as important. So like that's like, as we've expanded and grown our education department, I think that's where there's been a really big change. Obviously, of course, during the pandemic, we shifted a lot of stuff to virtual models. So like, we do have gender-affirming hormone care virtually now, you know, stuff like that. People can do virtual visits for birth control appointments. And then for education and advocacy, we've been doing our peer education programs virtually, like online, to minimize COVID risk. Advocacy has held a lot of workshops and trainings for like the general supporter base on Zoom. So that's like one of the big ones. And then just overall as well, like I think as, not to be like very apocalyptic sounding, but like as we do get closer to that intersection of where the climate change is going to start impacting the way that we transport goods and the way that we, you know, have society structured, it's going to impact even further the healthcare access we have, and where we can get it. So I think like as we are becoming acutely aware of it even more, we're really trying hard on like, I would say like educating and engaging with the younger generations and the younger voters and like patients to ensure that like they are getting access and have trusted providers prior to any significant changes to the healthcare industry, so that at least people have somewhere they can go, if that makes sense, and like letting people be like know and educate on it. So clinic, brick and mortar, gone right now temporarily. Of course, burnt down December 31st, 2021. I'm pretty sure it's the date. Could have been December 30th. I just know it was at the end of the year. I remember it was a Friday and I woke up and I was like, oh gosh. Granted, we are still wanting to rebuild. I think they're planning, the hope is that they'll start like breaking ground and rebuilding sometime this fall. They're like the biggest, the most hopeful and you know, great expectations would be, high hopes would be breaking ground in August. They've been waiting on like certain amount of materials and stuff, and they're like, you know, we'd rather have everything in so that once we start to finish type of deal. Could be max like 18 months so hopefully it'll be sooner, right? Maybe a year. But in the meantime, we have had a mobile health unit in. So like our mobile health van came in, I think we like unveiled it back in April, did like about a week of like, you know, kind of taste testing of like, how would this work? How would we get patients in type of deal? As they like streamline the process, we've now had it stationed every day, Monday through Friday, for the same hours, at a specific like partner location. It's on the website. We typically don't like to say the name or location out loud for security purposes. I mean, clearly the clinic was burnt. But the mobile health unit is there, and the cool thing too is actually we launched an app now called Planned Parenthood Direct, I think, that lets you actually like make an appointment through your phone, even for same day for the mobile health unit, which is nice. Because most people don't realize we're here still. So they're actually offering a lot more than I would expect for a mobile health van. So they're offering all the STI testing and treatments, which is nice. Prevention, so of course you can still get condoms, dental dams, and lubes there. They're offering pregnancy testing, they're offering UTI testing and treatment, they're offering well person visit, they're offering pap smears, and gender-affirming hormone care. I think those are the big ones. There might be like one or two other little things that I may be missing. Oh, and birth control, of course. They are doing implants, IUDs, and birth control pills for sure. So I know staffing-wise, so in external affairs, we have 3 of us here. There's 1 from advocacy, 2 in education here. And then clinically, I know we have, I think it's 3 for sure, mobile health providers. We may have 4, and there might be a 4th person that I've just not met. I'm not too sure, but I know 3 for a fact, 3 in external affairs. Supporters, there's no number on that. Like, first of all, advocacy has that information, but I would say we have a lot more support here than you would expect for being in East Tennessee. And then Chattanooga has a large supporter base, which is also really surprising, just because it is still technically in East-ish Tennessee, so it's like, whoa. But yeah, I would say a lot more than 100 supporters, you know, type of deal. Like, we probably have hundreds. I mean, we've seen for the Women's March, Repro marches, like, people turn out, so like, there's plenty.